when Diz suggested getting the Hot Club Quintet back, we went to see him. I forget where it was, but he was playing just with a piano trio. I think
It
he was
was. I
almost.
know where it was, Dave. It was at Ronnie Scott's.
Yes,
And
yeah,
I was trying to think who else was there, and you and I were there.
right.
And Ronnie came up to Diz because we were just sitting listening, and said, "Why don't you come back?" And goes back to meet Stefan. And the next night, Disley went back and played alongside Grappelli at Scott's.
Right.
So that's when they sort of started playing then.
Yes, yeah, yeah. Well, I didn't do the very, very first gig of that tour. The bass player that Diz booked was Johnny Hawksworth.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but at the end of that gig, Johnny Hawksworth got into a punch-up with some guy over a woman. Yes, and injured his hand. And so literally, one day the phone rings and says, "Brillo, how do you fancy working with Steph?" I thought, yeah, great, yeah, bring it on. And in fact, Diz told me about this, that Johnny Hawksworth was acting like a bit of a lunatic, sort of stuck a mic as right next to his bass, so he was louder than everybody else, and was sort of generally hogging the limelight. And according to Diz, Grappelli turned around to him and said, "Who is this? He is mad." And things like that. Yeah. So where was the gig now? I think it was at the Boggery in Solihull, Jasper Carrot's club, that I did there. And two members of Slade were along to listen. And so we did that tour, and that was fine. Now, Grappelli was very fussy. He liked things to be just so. He had an argument about avocado pears in a restaurant. Would you believe? No idea why. And that was that. Now, there's all the stories. I mean, Diz was sort of went from one sort of minor disaster to another, and I think Grappelli didn't like that at all.
I was quite surprised when you said that that Grappelli didn't like Disley because he was wayward. I mean, if Disley was wayward, Django Reinhardt must have been a nightmare to play with.
Ah, right. Therein lies a tale. Well, I'm saying that Disley is wayward because Diz goes his own way. You remember the fact that for something like 18 months he was travelling the folk clubs because he didn't even have a guitar. Because at one Cambridge Folk Festival, he left his Macaferry under his car while he went off to bonk a girl, and in fact the particular girl I knew because I was at college with her. So when he went back to his car and looked underneath, somebody had walked off with it, and he found it in an antique shop in West End Lane. No, in London, in West End Lane, and bought it back for 45 quid. But that wasn't the first time that sort of thing had happened. So for 18 months, he was wandering around the folk clubs, and he would borrow a guitar from whoever was in the club. And supposedly one night he turned up and there were no guitarists. So he was up a gum tree. And then obviously there was a period where he would go along to folk clubs and he would arrive so late that he wouldn't do a first set or a second set. He would just do the second half of the evening. So he did get very unreliable. I mean, myself, when I was at the college, he'd say, "I'll come and collect you at 7 o'clock." And at 20 to 8, he would finally turn up. So his sense of time was, well, Diz used to run on Diz time. Now, I don't think it was that Grappelli sort of hated Diz. I think Diz admired Django so much that perhaps, this is speculation on my part, that he absorbed some of Django's own
peccadillos.
His approach to playing. I mean, there's the well-known story, which I think Denny Wright told me about, another jazz guitarist who went to Paris, met Django at a gig, and Django said to him, "Oh, you're a guitarist. Well, I've got this gig in Lyon or somewhere else. Would you like to do it? Because I don't want to do it." And the guy said, "Well, yeah, but I haven't got a guitar with me." He says, "Oh, don't worry. Go to the club. Tell him I sent you. There's a guitar down there." So this guy goes down to this club and said, "Oh, Django sent me. I'll do the gig." And he looked, and there was this battered old guitar, and the strings all had knots in them. So they'd broken. But instead of replacing the strings, he put knots in them. And this guy was trying to play the guitar, and it was impossible. Yeah, try moving his finger, there would be the knot. Anyway, he managed to stagger through that. The next night, or a few days later, Django turned up, and this guy said, "Well, I've got to watch this." And of course, Django was tearing around this guitar with knots in the strings and everything else. Didn't matter. But just to back to your approach about Grappelli's opinion about Django. In the 50s, I believe, Diz wanted to bring Joseph Reinhardt, Django's brother, to London. And he's mentioned this to Grappelli. He said, and supposedly, this is what Diz told me, Grappelli said, "Oh, you have nothing to do with that family. They are mad."